Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Basra, Daf Ayin Vav, and as well Ayin Zayin. Amir Hashem will get toward the bottom of the page on Ayin Zayin Amid Beis. And we're starting about, I'd say, 15 or so lines from the bottom of Ayin Hey Amid Beis. The first word on the line is Itmar, more than halfway through the wide lines. The Gemara says Itmar Sfina. Let's say we're talking about a Sfina. We've been discussing agaritas, wild agaritas, and now we're discussing things that are more halachic. How do you make a kinyan on a boat? You can't pick it up. It says the Gemara, Rav Amar Kevan Shemashach Kol Shu Kana. Rav was of the opinion that once you do even the smallest meshicha, so let's say you have a boat, it could be a yacht, it doesn't matter. You pull a thing, any degree of measure that it's movable, kana. Shmuel Amar no. Shmuel Amar lo kana ad sheyimshoch es kula. You need to move it so that it's no longer in its initial space. So let's say it's in parking spot 1. It needs to be out of parking spot 1 in order for it to be deemed a kinyan. Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, we'll soon see that's going to cover the remainder of the Amud. The Gemara says, Lema kitanoi. Perhaps the machlokes that we have between Rav and Shmuel is actually a machlokes tanoi. This is based on a Gemara in Kedushin that we've seen a while ago. Ketzad b'Masira. How do we do a kinyan with Masira? So the Gemara tells us, Achsa b'talfa, if you grab onto the foot of the animal, the sara, its hair, be'ukaf she'aleha, if you grab onto its the saddle, b'shalif she'aleha, which is another piece of equipment, b'prumbia she'befiha, that's the piece that it has in its mouth, b'zug she'betzavara. Once you grab onto one of these things, kana, you've made the kinyan already. Ketzad b'mashicha. What are the parameters of doing a kinyan mashicha? So says the Gemara, korela, if I call the animal vihiba and the animal walks towards me, sheikish b'makiel v'rotza salafanav, or if I hit the animal with a stick and it begins to move because of my actions, kevan she'akra yad v'regel kina. This is all the shita of the Tanakama. Rav Achi, or Va'amri la Rav Acha, we're not exactly sure who authored this piece, Omer, ad shetahalech malei kumasa. So now we see the difference between the Tanakama and Rav Acha. We'll use Rav Acha's name. I don't know which one it is, but it's one of the two. Here we see Lema Rav de Amar ke Tanakama. Rav was like the Tanakama that when it comes to Mashicha, the second it starts walking, you've made a kinyan. And Shmuel de Amar ke Rabbi Acha, who says that it needs to move the whole height of the animal. So now we have a perfect match, and perhaps Rav and Shmuel's machlokes is actually rooted in the Tanaim. So it says the Gemara 7 lines from the bottom of the page toward the end of the line. Omar Loch, no, Omar Loch Rav, who says that the kinyan has a very low threshold, any movement counts. Omar Rav, Ona de Amre afilu Rav Acha. I agree that when we're talking about an animal, I agree with Rav Acha because Ad Kan lo ka'amri Rabbi Acha ela b'ba'alei chayim. Rabbi Acha was talking about animals. If an animal picks up its leg, look at flamingos. They stand on one leg. They're not walking anywhere. They just pick up a leg. Who cares if he picks up a leg? Aval svina, but a boat, kevan de nada bapurta, nada lakula. Once I move the front of the boat an inch, the whole boat moved an inch. What a fascinating chakira. This is like the most Jewish thing I've ever heard. There's a difference between a boat and an animal. When there's an animal, if it picks up a leg, lav dafka that it's moving. But if I move the boat, the whole boat moved. So Rav says, the Gemara says, don't say that this is Rav and Shmuel. It's not Rav and Shmuel. It's not true. The cases are not comparable. One's talking about a boat where the whole thing is one contiguous piece. One's talking about an animal where he can move his feet without moving the rest of his body. Shmuel gives the exact opposite svara, 4 lines from the bottom. Shmuel Amar Ana de Amre, if you look at Tanakama, I could agree even with the Tanakama in regards to an animal, because Ad Kan lo ka'amar Tanakama el b'ba'alei chayim, dekevan demei ikara yad v'regel, idach lemei akar kaima, because once it starts walking, then the animal is fully walking. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what Rav said. Aval svina imashich la kula in ilolo. Only if you move the whole thing does it count, not if you only move part of it. The initial footprint where the boat is sitting, if anything is overlapping, that's not a kinyan according to Shmuel. So anyways, we tried to bring a raya from a brisa and we failed because the cases of the boat and the cases of the animals are, according to both Rav and Shmuel, not comparable.
In this context means it's completely moved away from its spot.
Its footprint, yeah, correct. even though that's not really
Right.
mashma
'Cause
in
you
what's
did move
happening.
like you said before.
That's why it's not as svaradik as Rav's shita. Rav is a little
You did
cleaner.
move the whole thing back.
According to Rav, you did.
If you move it.
If you move it a little bit, you did.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not, meaning it's ki'ilu like the threshold between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. Rav says, I only need a little bit. Shmuel says, I got to get the whole thing over the threshold, completely out. We're going to learn about threshold soon, but that Rav is a little cleaner and a little easier to understand. So says the Gemara, maybe this machlokes Rav and Shmuel, perhaps we tried with one source in the Tanai, maybe this one is a better one. Lema kehani Tanai, the Tanya. We have a brisa, and as you can tell what the topic is, it's a boat. The Gemara learned its lesson. Don't try to compare a boat to an animal, because Shmuel and Rab are going to say in directions that we might not have understood even why those are not comparable. So let's try this. The Tanya, we have a brisa. This can be found in Kiddushin as well, a Tosefta in Kiddushin. Svina niknes b'mashicha. Sounds very Rav-esque so far. So the Tanakama holds that a svina can be nikne just by pulling it. Rav Nasan Omer, svina, a boat, the osios, which the Rashbam says, as if you look on the side, 4 lines from the bottom, Dibur Maskal, the osios, shtar chov shemochro. I'm selling a document that's worth money. Right? The document says that Michael owes me $10,000. So it says that Reb Nasan, a boat and osios, a shtar that's worth money, niknos b'mashicha. That sounds very similar to what the Tanakama said, no? What the Tanakama say? Sfina niknes b'mashicha. And here we see that Sfina b'osios niknos b'mashicha, we can acquire a boat and we can acquire a shtar chov with mashicha, ubishtar, and that's how we would make a kinyan. So says the Gemara, Reb Nasan, you are coming out of left field. Osios, mandakar shmaihu. Look back at the bottom line. What did the Tanakama say? Sfina niknes b'mashicha. What did Reb Nasan say? Osios too. So no, if you're going to come in and be the Baal Plukta, you should be arguing about something that was stated, and you're not really doing that. You agreed that the Sfina was niknes b'mashicha. You added in osios, which we weren't even talking about, and then you added in another form on the top of the page with shtar. So it says the Gemara, osios mandikar shmayu mehecha tesi. You, Reb Nasan, what are you talking about? Says the Gemara, you're 100% right. Top of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, Chasuri Mechzor B'Hachik Tani. You're right. Really, the brisa on the bottom of the page, or more accurately, the Tosefta from Maseches Kedushin reads like this: V'chiktani, Sfina niknes b'mashicha, v'osios b'masira. Oh, you okay? Now you're adding stuff to the Tanakama. Now I know what Reb Nassan's going to argue about. So now the Tanakama is rejigged a little bit. Yes, Sfina niknes b'mashicha, that we had on the bottom line of Ayin Hamid Beis, but we're adding in stuff that was missing about the Tanakama, which is v'osios b'masira. That the Tanakama was of the opinion that the osios, that a shtar chov can only be niknes with a mesira, handing it over to the person. Now Reb Nasan can be a Baal Plukta on a topic that was brought up. Reb Nasan Omer, Svina v'osios, niknos b'mashicha uvishtar. Says the Gemara, Reb Nasan holds that a Svina and a shtar chov can be niknes with mashicha and with a shtar. So now we understand a little bit better, because at least now, because we've added to the Tanakama's language, now we could understand a little bit more why it is that Reb Nasan wrote what he wrote. Says the Gemara, shtar l'svina lamali metaltalehi. Why do I need a shtar for a svina? It's metaltalen. We need a shtar for karka, unless you're doing a chazaka. We need a shtar for karka, but why need a shtar for metaltalen? So that doesn't make sense. Elolav. Therefore, this must be what the Brisa says. It's version 3 of our Brisa. Hachik Tani. This is the right way to understand the Tosefta. 6 lines down on Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Svina niknes b'mashicha va'osios b'masira. Like we saw in version 2. This was found at the top of this page. That a boat can be purchased with mashicha, and a shtar chov can be purchased with masira, the Tanakama. And Reb Nasan Omer, Reb Nasan says, Svina b'mashicha va'osios b'shtar. He says that a boat can be pulled with mashicha, and an osios can be done with bishtar. Asks the Gemara. So that's the correction: is that the osios are done with ishtar, and the svina is done with mashicha. So then the Gemara says, svina b'mashicha hainu Tanakama. But if you compare this new version of Reb Nasan to the Tanakama, it seems that they both agree that it's svina b'mashicha. Look 5 lines down. Hachiktani svina niknes b'mashicha. Look on the next line. Reb Nasan Omer svina b'mashicha. So why did he bother repeating it? So Ella, it must be de Rav v'Shmuel. Perhaps here, within this aspect of the machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Nasan in regards to svina b'mashicha, perhaps here Rav v'Shmuel ika beinaihu, where Rav would say the mashicha is small, just a little bit works, and the Tanakama would say no, that it has to be full. Says the Gemara, lo, that's not a good assertion to assume that Rav and Shmuel have their place in this machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Nasan. The Kule Alma Ike Rabbi Kishmuel. I could easily read that brisa, that Tosefta, with Rav's lens or with Shmuel's lens, and that is easy to do. Ubisvina, and in regards to a boat, Kule Alma Lo Pligi. And the reason why Reb Nasan wrote the same din about a svina, that it's niknes b'mashiach, is because he agrees. Ki pligi. Where is the only place that Reb Nasan and the Tanakama disagree? That's ba'osios. This is what Reb Nasan is actually responding in the Tosefta to the Tanakama. The svina vaday modin alach. I agree with you when it comes to a svina, that a svina is niknes b'mashicha. But the osios i'ika shtar in ilolo. But when it comes to osios, you need to have a shtar. That is not going to work in any other way. You cannot use mashicha. And really, that's what the machlokes is about. Ubeplugta tahani tanoi. And really, this is connected to another machlokes in the Tanoim. Titania, we have a brisa from Kiddushin, osios niknos b'mesira. Here we see that the Tanakama says that shtarei chov, a document that's worth money, is given over b'mesira. Direi Rebbe, v'chachamim omrim, bein kosav v'lo masar. Bein masar v'lo kosav. You need 2 features. If you wrote it without handing it over to the person, or if you handed it over to the person without writing it, lo kanat shichtov v'yimsor. You have a double requirement in regards to osios, in regards to shtarei chov, that in order for that to be a proper transaction, the din is, according to the Chachamim, that you need both features of ksiva and mesira. So, b'mai ukimta, Rebbe. What did we see? We said that it's like Rebbe, that the Tanakama of the Brisa is Rebbe, and the Tanakama of our Tosefta from Kiddushin, the 3 versions that we saw, is also Rebbe, which means that Rebbe holds over here that osios are niknos b'masira, and osios are niknos b'masira in the Brisa too. So that means, therefore, if that's true, svina nami tikni b'masira. Why don't we also say that a boat is also going to be niknes b'masira? Titania, because we have this in a brisa too. Svina niknes b'masira divrei Rebbe. Namely, if the Tanakama from Kiddushin, from the Tosefta and Kiddushin, holds like Rebbe in the brisa from Kiddushin in regards to osios niknes b'masira, then maybe the Tanakama from Kiddushin and the Tosefta agrees with Rebbe with yet another brisa, and that is that a svina is niknes b'masira. Rebbe. Maybe we should have Rebbe fitting with all the cases. Let me just finish that sentence. Here we see that the Chachamim are saying that the only way you make a kinyan is with Mashicha, or until you rent that place. So that's it, but not like the Tanakama. So what we are trying to understand is, how do we make work together with Tosefta from Kiddushin, with the Brisa and Kiddushin, when one seems to be Rebbe and the other seems to only be half of Rebbe's Shita. So the Gemara says, don't worry. Really everything is Rebbe. We're on Ayin Vav Amid Beis, and we are on the top line end of the line. Lo kasha. Kan birshus harabim, kan bisimta. One case is talking about in Rishus Harabim, and one case is talking about in a simta, in an alleyway, and those are the differences between the Brisa and Kiddushin and the Tosefta and Kiddushin. So says the Gemara, that's fine. B'mai ukimta lehabas raisa b'rishus harabim. We said that this last brisa, the one from the bottom of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, is talking about rishus harabim. But says the Gemara, if that's true, then I don't understand how the Chachamim are arguing on Rebbe. Ema Seifa, if we are saying that the brisa from the bottom of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph is talking about rishus harabim, then v'chachamim omrim lo kana achim shechena v'ibirshus harabim miman ogir. Who are you doing Mashicha from? There's no property change out there. It's Rishus Harabim. Not only that, who are you going to be Oger from? V'su Mashicha b'Rishus Harabim mikanya. Mashicha doesn't work in Rishus Harabim. Mashicha is a din that works in private property. Doesn't work anywhere. You gotta cross the threshold. You gotta move it from. It's a private rishus type of thing. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. If you're saying that the Bryce on the bottom of Ayin Vav Amid Aleph is talking about Rishus Harabim, that's fine with the Tanakama, with Rebbe, but it doesn't work with the Rabbanon. So says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Mashiach Rishus Rabim Mikanya. After all, Abaye v'Rava da Amri Tarvayu. They both agree to the following principles of Kinyanim. And this actually can be found in Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat and Siman Kuf Tzadi Ches. And the Gemara says, Mesira, when I hand you something, that's Kone Birshus Harabim Uvechatzer, She'ena Shal Shneya. That applies in a public place, and it applies in a field that neither you or I own. Meshicha, we're 8 lines down on Ayin Vav Amid Beis. Kone Besimta. Meshicha does work in a simta, Uvechatzer Shehi Shal Shneim. It works in a simta, which is a semi-public place, like an alleyway. And it works in a chatzer that both of them own. Seemingly the most powerful form of kinyan that's being expressed here is hagba. So says the Gemara, if that's true, then my adshim shachena nami de ka'amar. What then did the Chachamim mean when they said that there's Mashicha? Umay adshi yiskor es mekoma de ka'amar hachi de ka'amar. What then were the Chachamim saying with these two things? With the Yim Shechena and the Sheyiskor es mekoma, says the Gemara halfway down hachi kamar. Ad Yim Shechena me rishus harabim lesimta. Now, so now the Gemara is saying that the Chachamim meant that when the Chachamim said that there's no Kenyan until there's Mashiach or until there's Chiras Makom, that's only talking about the Mashiach taking place over the threshold from Rishus Harabim into a Simta. But if you're only within a Rishus Harabim, that doesn't work. V'im Rishus Bailim hi lo kana ad sheyiskor es mekoma. But when you are in Rishus Bailim, not in a Simta, if you're in Rishus Bailim, then in order to make a purchase, you have to actually buy the property. So the Gemara says that's really a great explanation and good fundamentals in regards to kinyanim. But it causes for a problem within the Klale Hapsak. Why? Lema Abai v'Rava da Amre ki Rebbe. How can they paskin like Rebbe? Rebbe's a das yachid. Halacha v'Rabim yachid v'Rabim halacha ki Rabim. But the way that Rava and Abaye are talking, the way that Abaye and Rava are talking, it seems that they hold like Rebbe. So says the Gemara, don't worry. Amar Rav Ashi, 2/3 of the way down. Ida Amar le lech chazek v'kani. If they said lech chazek v'kani hachanami, that would have been true that you would have had a problem. Hacha b'mayaskinan, that's not our case. The case that we're dealing with is the Amar le lech meshoch v'kani. If the seller said to the person, I want you to do mashicha. If I tell you to do mashicha, does that make it the only way that you can do the kinyan? So Mar Savar Kpeda. One person says that the seller must think that the buyer must think that the seller's makbid on the form of kinyan because he said mashoch. Mar Savar Mar Makamulo is just indicating to him how maybe one should do a kinyan, but lav dafka that you need to do a kinyan. And because that's true, we're able to see over here that Rava and Abaye are not siding with Rebbe. They're just talking about a very specific case where there is a machlokes, and that would be the case if the seller specifically said mashoch. That brings us to a connected sugya, but a little bit of a different topic, and then that's going to be the next amud or so, and then we'll get to a new mishnah on the top of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. Amar Rav Papa, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Hayman de mazbin leishtar lechavre. Somebody who sells a document to his friend. The document is worth money. Tzarach lemichtav le kani hu v'chol shibuda debei. That you get the document and the entire shibud that's connected to it. So Amar Rav Ashi, Amrisa l'shmaisa kamed Rav Kahana. I said this in front of Rav Kahana. Ve'amris le taima de kasav lehachi. The reason why we do this. Amrisa l'shmaisa kamed Rav Kahana. Ve'amris le said to him, taima de kasav lehachi hachi. Halo kasav lehachi lo kani. He said you have to say this language, otherwise there wouldn't be a kinyan. But it's very odd to say that. It sounds like you're only talking about the paper itself. What do you mean, everything that comes with it? It's the money that comes with it. So why are you adding in this broader language? So the Gemara says it must be that we actually need the paper. Says the Gemara, Amar li in litzur ulitzur. The paper is the nafkamina between that language and not. And the paper was valuable. We live in a culture, we have a throwaway culture. We buy disposable stuff. Our garbage is ridiculous per household. It's not normal. But back in the day, they were much more frugal about these things. So the piece of paper was valuable, especially if it was parchment. Maybe it could be used for many years. So it was very valuable to them. So yes, that was going to be a part of the kinyan. And that brings us to the top of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, which I think is actually today's daf, if my calendar is correct. Amar Ameimar Hilchasa Osios Niknos B'Masira Kirebi. We paskin like Rebbe, which again is a little bit difficult because of Yachid Barabim Malacha Kirabim, but nevertheless that's the case. Amar Le Ravashi Lameimar Gemara Osvara. Do you have a tradition that we hold like Rebbe, or are you just pulling from Svara? Which one is it? What motivated you to hold like Rebbe? Amar Le Gemara. He said, I have a tradition that we hold like Rebbe. Amar Ravashi says back to him, Svara namihu, to osios mili ninhu, umili bimili lo miknin. He says there's a svara as to why we should hold like Rebbe as well. Rebbe says that when it comes to a document that's worth money, it can only be nikna b'masira. Ravashi adds a svara. You have a document that's worth money, and the way you transfer it is by a document with words. Now you have words selling words. The words on the document says, I hereby declare that the document in this envelope is nikna. No. He says that's like, I don't know, that's like trying to clean water with water. It's not shaykh. They're the same exact things. Says the Gemara, that's not true, Velo. You're not able to use a shtar in order to purchase a shtar. After all, Amar Rabba bar Yitzchak Amar Rab, Shnei shtaros heim, Zachu b'sadeh leploni, v'kis v'lo es hashtar. If those were the things that you said, Zachu b'sadeh leploni, and write a shtar, Choser b'shtar ve'eno choser b'sadeh. You can go back on the shtar, but you can't go back on the sadeh. But if instead you write, and this is a different shtar, almanas shetichtu v'lo es hashtar, then you're choser bein b'shtar bein b'sadeh. This case is not the case we need to ask on what we just said. But the next case is, and this is what we are going to see now. Reb Chia bar Avin Amar Rav Huna says, Shlosha shtaros hein, Trey hada Amran, the two above we just saw, in the name of Rabba bar Yitzchak. And Idach, here's the one that we need to focus on now. That's a kasha on Ravashi. Ravashi wanted to say that there's a svara as to why we hold like Rebbe, and the svara is that osios milinin, who umili b'mili lo miknin. You can't make a kinyan on a Word document from a Word document. Not able to. Says the Gemara, the Idach, bottom line of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, Im Kadam Mocher B'Kasav Es Hashtar. If the Mocher preempted the document before the sale ever took place, Ke'osa Sheshaninu, like we see over here, and the Rashbam fills in the gaps. Shemoter Lasos Kain Afal Gav Demechse Kishikra. I wrote a shtar on January 1, knowing that you'll be in town on January 10th. The document says, I hereby am selling this property to David Merzel, and the whole thing is done. So it's mechzek kishikar, we allow it to happen. Kosvin shtar lemocher, we are still allowed to write a shtar to the mocher, afal pisha ein lokeach imo. You're allowed to buy that document, even if the buyer's not there. Kevan shehichzik ze bekarka, nikne shtar b'chol makom shehu. V'zoi sheshanim, nechasim shem machrais, niknenim nechasim sheshem machrais. V'kesef v'shtar v'chazaka. So here, what do we see? We're buying the shtar that I wrote to David, even though David wasn't there, and a third party bought it. How did they buy it? With a shtar. So therefore, we see that a shtar can be used to buy a shtar. Says the Gemara, you made a mistake. The kinyan that I had with David wasn't a kinyan of a shtar. That was agav. That was a kinyan agav, and kinyan agav is shiny. That's a little bit different. A kinyan agav, if you look in the Rashbam, about halfway down, agav aseifa. It's actually the next line. Let's just read the Gemara one more second. Agav shiny. Daha matbea delo nikni bechalipin. Ve'agav ara nikni. It's agav ara. So the Rashbam says halfway down, Maskal agav aseifa, saf beso. It's the threshold of the house. Mikarka kadeshi avim lo. The kinyan that I made with David wasn't actually a written shtar. It was actually dealing with the threshold of my home, and that's why the kinyan worked. And the Gemara says, Ki hadirab papa, habule tresar alfe zuze, be chozai. He had 12,000 zuz in the city of Chozai. Akninhu nihale l'Rav Shmuel bar Acha. He gave over the rights of Shmuel bar Acha to collect the money for him. Agav asefa de besa. And he did so at the threshold of the house. It wasn't a shtar to buy the money. It was a kinyan agav. And ki asa nafak la'ape ad tavach. And he met him, that is to say, Rav Papa met Rav Shmuel bar Acha with the money in order to collect it from him. But he empowered him with the kinyan agav, not with a kinyan on the shtar. So that's how the Gemara wriggles out of this question. Lastly, before the new Mishnah, Aval lo machar lo es ha'avadim v'lo es ha'martzufin v'lo es ha'antiki. We had said in the Mishnah that if you sell a boat, you're not selling the antiki. We already translated this when we learned it a few days ago. My antiki, amar papa iska de begava. Whatever asek you have in the boat, namely the products that you're selling. Let's learn this Mishnah in a couple lines into the Gemara, and we'll stop at the 2 dots, 8 lines before the end of the page. Machar es hakaron. Let's say I'm selling a chariot or a wagon. Lo machar es haprados. I'm not selling the donkeys. Machar es haprados. If I'm selling the donkeys, lo machar es hakaron. And then I'm not selling the chariot. Machar es hatzemed. Lo machar es habakar. If I am selling the item that holds animals into that, I don't know what it's like, a multi-leash setup to hold the bakar. There's a word for it that I'm not thinking of right now, but it's basically what holds, let's say 3, 4, 5 cows to plow the field together. If I sell the device that holds them, then lo machar es habakar, I'm not selling the cattle. Machar es habakar, lo machar es hatzemet. So again, whatever you're selling, you're selling. Whatever you're not selling, you're not selling. It's not intuitive. That's why, like when we buy things online, it says you're holding an iPhone, you're buying an iPhone case, phone not included. Pashut, the phone's not included. It's $12.99. You're not buying an iPhone for $12.99 with a case. The case is $1 in plastic. That's all you're paying for. There's no way that you're buying. So that's what our Mishnah is saying. You don't even need those little caveats. It's pashut based on what you're looking at. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hadam im Modin. He said, forget about halacha. Yeah, it's kind of that way. He said, you got to look at the dollars. Ketzad Amarlo, Machar Tzimercha b'Masayim Zuz, Adav Redush, Einat Zeb b'Masayim Zuz. If I'm selling if I'm selling the iPhone case and it's $1,000, that's mashma that there's a phone in there, right? That makes sense because it doesn't make sense to charge $1,000 for a phone case. So that Rabbi Yehuda would be okay with. The Chachamim Omrim Ein Hadamim Raya, which is a kasha, because then you get into like the isser of ona, of like overcharging and undercharging. Okay. The Gemara says, last little bit for the day today. Tani Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava Kamed Rabbi Abo. Machar es hakaron, machar es haprados. He says the exact opposite of what our Mishnah says. That if you're selling the chariot, you're also selling the mules that pull the chariot, the donkeys. What about our Mishnah? Ve'onan lo machar tanan. Our Mishnah says no. Amar le ismiye. Do you want me to erase this brisa? Amar le lo. Titargem masnisayich. Just explain the brisa that we're talking about a case where they are adukin. What does this mean? Take a look at the first long line of the Rashbam. Dibur hamaschel tetargem masnischa b'she'adukin bo shekshurun b'yachad b'shas hamechira. If I say I'm selling the bakar and they're all with their reins on, ready to plow the field, that means I'm selling both. So that's how he answers up the stira and the brisas. I should say the steer between the Brisa and the Mishnah. The Brisa says, when the Brisa says, Machar es hakaron, Machar es haprados, it's contextual. Look at what I'm selling you. If I say, you are buying that thing in my field, either I can say tzemed or bakar, because the tzemed are with the bakar, so then you're selling both. All right, we'll stop right here at these 2 dots of Machar es tzemed, lo Machar es bakar. We'll pick up Amir Hashem tomorrow with 1 blot. Tomorrow's a little bit of a longer Amud Beis. What is tomorrow? Wednesday? Thursday is fine. Longish. Well, we'll be fine then. I don't know what spoiled means, but we'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.